guys, welcome back to Barcelona. It's really good to be here. We didn't use this stage last time, so it's kind of like a proper theater. So I hope we put on a good show. You ready?
Yes, let's do it.
Let's do it.
All right, we're talking subnets. And what's cool is that last time in Barcelona, DeFi Kingdoms, you guys were live.
Yes, that's right.
A real blockchain scaling solution. That's awesome. How does it feel?
Oh, it's like really been a wild ride. We were, I think, the first subnet to launch on like Avalanche, and still, I think, the biggest by a large margin. But it's just been really great for us because just having the ability to scale our game has been so huge. Like we sort of broke the old Harmony chain that we came from multiple times, and the concern was if we launched on any other L1, we would break them too. And so having our own subnet has really been a boon to us because it actually allows us to scale, and having Ava Labs to help to support that has been just like priceless. So it's really been a wild ride, and it's really great that we're there on the subnets.
Honestly, we're really fortunate. We went through quite the learning experience together, and what we're doing is not easy, and we're really glad to have you guys along for the ride. So if you guys haven't checked out DeFi Kingdom, they have their own subnet, and it's powered by...
Powered by Avalanche, of course.
Oh, I was going to say the Jewel token.
So we have our own, so it's like our own Jewel token that is used for gas. It's also used elsewhere in our game for power-ups and like for voting and governance and things like that. But it's just a whole new like use case to have that actually be used for powering the transactions on the chain. And speaking of transactions, we actually do more transactions in terms of gas than any other L1 out there, than like Ethereum, C-Chain, and like Polygon, and all those other ones out there. So we do a ton of transactions, and so having that be in Jewel is a huge extra use case in the like utility there for that token. So it's just been really great. Honestly,
it's been amazing basically seeing the growth and the activity and the community. There's so much you can actually do on your chain with your characters now. I remember like the bridge. That bridge was crazy. Like right when that launched, tell us about that.
Yeah, so we started out on Harmony and we expanded to Avalanche on our own subnet. And it was the first time we had been multi-chain. So in order to make that work, we had to have a bridge. And that on that day, we had, I think, the highest amount of transactions that were bridged in terms of transactions and in terms of volume by far that Synapse had ever seen. And I think, I don't have the exact number, but it was just this huge spike if you look back in history. And we had to...
I think it was over $400 million in a single day.
Yeah, it was just a ton all at once. And that was just crazy to see how it basically went flawlessly, although it did kind of like slow down everything else because we had to wait for some of it to work through the system. We had to launch a day later than we had planned, which was fun, but it's a good problem to have. You have so many people that are anxious to get in, and it was just amazing.
I think that you guys have set like probably the example, because more than half of the subnet projects that I work on are basically games, right? So you guys basically set the stage, and you predated like this massive rush in Web3 gaming, in my opinion, of like playable games as opposed to like play to earn games. Yeah, and with that, I kind of wanted to open it up to Steven. Steven, tell me about some of the games you've been working with. Tell us about like the type of support that you've been offering some of these projects. And I feel like you and I, we have very similar roles. Like we help subnets get to production. So tell us about some of these and the type of support that you've offered them.
Yeah, so our mission statement is to help builders bring blockchain technology to the world by making subnets easy. And every conversation we have with the game, and non-games as well, is just basically a big question. Same thing for you, questions of, okay, you want to get to launch, what's blocking you from getting to launch? Turns out there's a large surface area there, right? It's not just get hardware and go launch. Also tokenomic concerns. There's what customizations do I need for my VM? Do I build my own VM? Or do I use a subnet EVM? Who do I use for the Explorer? Who's doing the indexing? What wallet do I use? Do I need a money transmitter license? What do I need? What type of NFT marketplace do I need? So I guess what we learned the most by far is that subnets do really well, or projects that want to launch do really well by choosing a really good partner to work with. And like we were just talking with Jeff about this as well, by far the best thing that we've discovered is to optimize for feedback exchange. Because like you said, none of this stuff is easy. If you're building an app chain, there's probably a mission critical reason for building an app chain. So it's really important to get right, like really, really important to get right. So everything has got to be pixel perfect.
Yeah, and if anyone in the audience is like looking to deploy a subnet or actively exploring it, you're not alone. And we've helped a lot of projects, and this is kind of the point of this session, essentially showing the experience of projects that have already gone into production and the ones coming up, and to say that like oftentimes it's difficult to solve problems for the first time, especially in new and emerging technology where everyone's inventing new words and it's complicated. And in truth, like you have partners, and we are pretty good people to come talk to, and we're glad to offer this advice. So speaking of advice, Jeff,
You're killing these movements here, Lucien.
It's the first. It's the first day of the conference. I still have a voice. I'm glad mine was early.
Yeah, unpreparedness is key.
Yes.
Yeah. So advice. I'm not a lawyer. So yeah, Stephen and I were talking about what are the different ways that a subnet can come to market, and one of the things he just mentioned, which is huge, is they are dealing with tokenomics that are really diverse. What we found with working with our projects who are looking at Avalanche and thinking about a subnet as far as like their end state, whether they're going to C-chain first, and that's just like, on the roadmap, is you actually may be able to configure your subnet towards a decentralization strategy, towards a revenue strategy, et cetera. And our team is focused on now taking what we do with economics design and go-to-market design, and combining that with our infrastructure team, who is very experienced with Avalanche. We're running, I think, 3 live node IDs right now, and all of that knowledge. And we're like, hey, we have the team that can actually take a subnet to launch in a way that they never thought they could before. We can work with early stage founders on how are you going to do tokenized product design all the way through economics, through configuring an actual subnet, and in some cases actually standing up a testnet right through implementation. And the cool thing is, wrapping with Steven, is that we actually are finding partners here this week of, hey, can we hand this over, and this team needs more, maybe they need more cash, or they need more liquid AVAX to come to the situation and actually stand up a node for them or run infrastructure. Our team can do that. We're not fully running infrastructure for subnets, but we will be. And in the interim, we can hand over like very astute implementation for a subnet back to the Avalanche team, who's been awesome partners for the last couple of years, over to teams like Stevens. So we're just excited, and we're actually soft kind of announcing that this week, that we're going to be doing full protocol design for projects. We've kind of made a name for ourselves with our economics design, and now we're like, hey, we can take you right onto the metal and running your own protocol. We're stoked. Yeah.
So on that note, I've often get this question. I'm like, how do I get all that Avax to run the network, right? And again, I think the theme of this talk is basically you're not alone, and you shouldn't be considering that you have to run all of your validators by yourself, right? So on that note, I would like to ask Steven, what product have you launched recently?
Yeah, so Friday we just launched GoGoPool. GoGoPool is a staking protocol built for Avalanche subnets to help people source their AVAX, source their hardware a lot cheaper, a lot faster, based on combo of liquid staking and the GGP token. So CTA, if you want to run a validator node for 1,000 AVAX and start talking to subnets, come talk to me. But I actually wanted to ask Frisky Fox, like for us, we're definitely really focused on how to help people get a decentralized node operator set, but also to their comfort, right? Of some people need to start off permission, then they want to go permissionless, and on the permission set, maybe they want to run like 4 of their hardware. It's like, okay, cool, we'll help you source the Avax for that. But what we're noticing is that every team wants to go about it differently. Like you guys have a diverse node operator set. How'd you go about selecting kind of like who's running your nodes? Like what did that process look like?
Yeah, actually, at the start, there was a lot of talk about what's the best way to do that, and we had planned on having some that were run by Ava Labs and us. In the end, we actually went a different route and decided just to run all 8 nodes ourselves at the start, just as we tweak it, as we set it up, and as we sort of like optimize it for all those transactions that like we'd be doing. And it was in sort of like lockstep with Ava Labs, who was like helping us every step of the way. I actually really wish we had you guys around back then, because we were pretty much the pioneers. It was just like everything we were doing was new, and we were kind of figuring it out together with Ava Labs, which was great. But having some of those tools would have been priceless. But I think all of those things that like you were mentioning about like bridging and like explorers and all those things, I was having flashbacks like, oh yeah, we had to do all those things ourselves. So that's really awesome. And then, as you said, it's sort of sort of like a phased rollout. Like you start off here, and like you want to get here, and so you have to have like small steps about how do we sort of like migrate to where we want to be, and what's the proper way to do it. So all those things are things that we're currently in actual like active talks about. Is like how do we expand it so that there's more like third-party validators from the community, and like have it be more sort of like the end goal is to just basically like run itself without any centralized anything, you know. And it's already very much that way, but it's sort of like this is the last thing that we need to do, just have it be even more than it is. So yeah, that's a really good question.
Bullish.
Super bullish.
Super bullish.
On that, yeah, people often look at running validators as an expense, but in reality, it's an opportunity. And it's an opportunity basically to add utility to your token. It's opportunity to basically empower your community to grow like the total involvement and allowing people to run validators themselves permissionlessly. And this is going to be our next phase. We're transitioning to the point where you can run permissionless subnets using proof of stake that's managed all on chain. And I was going to open it up to Jeff to talk about kind of, it's an open-ended topic, which is why
Yes.
I let you take it.
Oh God, where do I want to start with this? So it's an early topic, but I've literally been thinking about it since your move to a subnet. So I was not on the migration, but I was there when it landed, and I remember being in my office in downtown Denver, getting on that subnet and playing with it, and I was like, on the Avalanche roadmap is permissionless validation for subnets. That means that utility tokens that are being used as network fees on their own subnet can achieve decentralization by way of technology. So that's very, very different than when you saw in the last 2 years is all these projects coming out, they're launching governance tokens in a very hurried way. And they really didn't think of the ramifications like, oh, I need to coordinate like all these disparate groups of people all over the world speaking different languages, and like they have to do governance, and that's how we're going to decentralize. And I've been an adopter of DAOs since the first DAO, and I've been paying attention, and we need to do better. So I actually just wrote something about this and published it last week on our Substack. But if you were to take what's going on with utility token launches that are products or app chains, like y'all are, I can say that, right? You're an app chain?
Yes, for sure we are.
Cool, so you're an app chain. Actually taking the economic design of your product and how you're supposed to have the token moving through it, unlocking utilities, all the things we talk about on a day-to-day basis, but also being used as gas on the network in those validators, rewarding the validators, incentivizing validators to come to your network because your game is so good, because you have so many users, you have $400 million moving over here. It's a really, really bullish case for decentralization of utility tokens in a faster story arc than going the pure way of the DAO. And I think DAOs will be there for sure. Like you're going to want to have that communication and community activation layer with the interim leadership before you go to full decentralization. But if you have on your roadmap an ability to decentralize it with the technology itself, becoming the protocol, as I like to say, that's huge. And the end of like my thesis for that is, and a lot of the work that we do with like regulated markets and public offering of private securities, is that you could come, fully around the sun, and you've gone completely around this classification of securities that utility tokens are up against every single day. Like if you go back and look since 2015, you probably have, count on one hand maybe, how many utility tokens are actually decentralized that aren't the protocol themselves. So with Avalanche subnets, the project and the utility token can become the protocol. And that's like, that kind of blew my mind. And when I saw you guys do it, I was like, oh, shit, that can really happen. So I've been working on that thesis, and now we're kind of happy to kind of bring that design to our clients who are running on subnets.
I'll just add a thought there if that's okay. Yeah, so that's exactly what all of us were thinking too. Like having that extra utility for the token is just huge, but also just from the standpoint of ideology, like if you're a player of a game and you love that game and you're invested in it and like you want to see it to grow and to basically stay outside of one central place, like having the ability for players to actually validate and actually run servers for their games that they play and have the ability to earn in-game things from that is just a whole new like paradigm shift that like we're going for here. So it's like, imagine if like you played World of Warcraft or something and then you had the opportunity to actually help to run the servers for that and actually earn things from doing that. And actually if who is it, like Blizzard, if like it stopped creating the game, you could continue if you wanted to. Like it's not ran by a centralized thing, and that's really like the end goal I think here.
Totally. And you have, I guess one more thing, I'll just echo in there. So you've got like the game, and we should riff on this later. You have the game and you're running it on, you know, you're validating all of like your transactions with your native utility token. You're like realizing the dream. And then you have assets that are, maybe the images are being propagated by IPFS. The final piece of the puzzle, and this is actually coming online right now, you should pay attention to this, is the interface. So like hosting the interface of the game in a decentralized way where it's being validated by nodes, that's coming online, and that's end state. Like that, then you have a fully decentralized product, fully decentralized assets, fully decentralized image of the assets if they're playable assets,
Exactly.
and the utility token acting as the network fees.
Right, and it's like the ownership. Like you own your assets and you own the ability to play the game and you own the game. Like you can run the game, you can run your own interface, you can do everything.
Quite literally, and if you're lucky and you're not deemed a security, like, you know, GG can't come after you because you're holding this asset that is purely decentralized and you're actually realizing financial upside holding onto that asset in a legal way, which is, again, end state.
I always found it ironic that we could be talking about video game items and then somehow like run into regulation. It's like, let us play, please. And in truth, like there is a component, it's like try to stop us. And actually, please don't. But the other aspect is, yeah, I think decentralization of the entire stack has always been the goal. And the way in which you achieve that has never actually been entirely clear. So we're at the point now where we're starting to decentralize the actual infrastructure of the blockchain itself in an accessible way, because it's a bit unfortunate that some projects, some scaling solutions stopped at a local maximum that's completely centralized. And I'm not really willing to make that trade-off, especially when it comes to like real-world value transfer that effectively will be manipulated in ordering. So there's reasons why we decentralize. There's reasons why like we want to basically have these tools. And it's awesome that we can effectively build them together, because how it gets used and the fact that it's being like piloted by gaming is probably the coolest thing ever. It's because you guys are good at technology, are early adopters, and your users are like all for it, and it's a value proposition in and of itself. And soon it's going to be effectively one tool that you can use in your like arsenal of game design or systems design or system engineering. And eventually it's going to be at the point where it's just going to be this like dependable yet decentralized backend for a lot of things. And while we get there, I think it's important to essentially say that like this momentary like, oh, I can't figure this out, the people that are like in this industry already at this point are smart enough to figure out basically any problem. I feel like we've already solved several impossible problems in this space, and several of us, like, we're here because we're early with subnets. We have a lot of experience in it, and the other part is that, like, we have an active role in kind of informing and educating people and getting through those problems as well. So, Stephen, you spend a lot of time, like, training, consulting. How would you phrase it? Like, working with, empowering,
Helping them ship. I don't know. Yeah.
helping them ship. Yeah, I mean, that's a good way to put it, because if it's not in production, does anyone care? Yeah, and that's an important thing to say. Like, if there is an issue that you run into with regards to getting to production, reach out to us, and, like, we'll basically help you figure it out, because there shouldn't really be any blockers anymore. Like, our industry is mature enough. Like, DFK, you guys have been basically crushing it with how many, like, transactions and your gas usage. You already set a very high bar that if someone is, like, trying to do more on the EVM, please don't. Right? And, like, just basically, you have such a big design space that you can work through because of your example, and we help with that design space, right? So, Jeff, you help with, like, token economics and design. So what are the other services that Republic offers?
Yeah, so we obviously work with a lot of Web3 founders, and that's, like, as you mentioned, everything from economics design. We're also focused, like, really keenly on, like, tokenized product design. So it looks a lot like design thinking on the front end, actually, and we have a lot of team members who have that background, including myself. Go-to-market strategy, we are a network of incredible partners inside of Republic, Avalanche being one of them already, and meeting new partners on this trip. And then my department that I run is actually tokenization. I actually work with founders to set up their treasury and actually take an asset to a mainnet blockchain or a subnet in a way that they're probably not familiar with. And on the back end of tokenization, we have, I'd mentioned Runtime, which is our node infrastructure team. It's running full node infrastructure. We're doing that with a variety of different stakeholders, whether that's high net worth individuals or working with the protocols themselves. We work with a lot of protocols who are standing up validation, either beta net or mainnet for the first time ever, and helping them or showing them problems with their validation schema. So, like, really smart team. That's the piece that we're bolting on for subnet design right now inside of advisory. And then I'd be remiss not to mention that, like, we are a team inside of Republic.com, which is, you know, born out of the 2016 Jobs Act for regulated crowdfunding. And so I also, believe it or not, spend another part of my life talking to lawyers and, you know, broker-dealer on how do we configure assets for transfer restrictions, e.g. security tokens. So our team is also working on the future and Republic 3.0 and bringing private security offerings on chain, which is kind of I would say, like, the life mission behind Republic as a whole. Yeah.
And Stephen, you help people become validators at half price, which should be really good when subnets take off and you can't choose which one to validate, so you can do two. So what else do you help crypto founders with? Because you're very involved in the community as well.
Yeah, I was going to say, one thing that we learned very early on, the theme of today's talk, but definitely that community is really important, especially in crypto. The community is so powerful. So one thing we're very focused on is helping create, so these validator nodes, really it's an excuse just to meet as many awesome people as possible so that we can all work together to create this ecosystem of open source tooling for subnets. We're definitely starting things off, so outside of GoGoPool and kind of cultivating this very mission-oriented community of helping make subnets easy. We spend a lot of our time, a ton of our time on creating open source tooling for subnet projects that we're talking to, helping deal make with validator nodes. For, like, Chorus One is an amazing partner. So helping bring in other validator nodes who are kind of been there, done that into the conversation as well. And then coming soon, tomorrow, come to my workshop to see what the second kind of product is that's all geared towards helping a Subnet developer wrap their head around what is a Subnet EVM, how do I set this up, how do I especially work with my team to create kind of our own POC or MVP of what the app chain would look like. And then once I'm ready for that, how do I easily loop in any of these partners or the community that I just talked about?
Nice. And Fox, besides running like a game company and a blockchain, you've basically created an ecosystem for gamers and a platform for gamers. And I wanted to talk a bit about, like, since you have the most experience running a subnet, like, what's next?
Yeah, well, I think Steven sort of said it. You know, community is so important in this space. Like, there's all these amazing tools here to create a subnet and to have all this like instant access to all this technology, but it's the community itself that's harder to replicate. So we actually invite any like interested like apps out there that are trying to start games and things like that to actually come and use ours. Like, if you want to build on our chain, you can. Like, reach out to us. We'll add you into our interface as like a NPC or something, and we will integrate with you and have our like, I think 5,000 to 10,000 users that are very, very active have instant access to your app, and they're hungry for more apps too. So if you want that and you don't want to worry about having your whole subnet, you could just hit us up, and like, we have an optimized subnet for that. We've already optimized it for games. We do millions of transactions every day. We do tons of gas. So we're interested in that because in my mind, Web3 is about the opportunity to create a metaverse. Like, you have stuff in your game, we have stuff in our game. Let's have it be on the same chain and have it actually integrate with each other and have assets from like one game actually work in the other game. That's the end goal. So I would invite everyone out there who's trying to build a game to speak with us about that. And I think you'll be surprised. We have a lot of really good ideas out there. So.
If I were talking to some gaming studios who would be interested, how can I send them to you?
So you can just reach out to us. We're on Discord, DeFi Kingdoms, I think. I'm pretty sure, right, Bolan? He's our community manager. So yeah, just like reach out there. You could also, if you search for like my name, it has all my info there with the contact. So yeah, just reach out to us and we will hook up about it.
Great. Yeah, well, hopefully you all do know how to reach us. Well, I mean, you're at the conference, so feel free to find us and talk with us further. And thank you. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, everyone.